Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BA Insight session. I'm once again very pleased to be joined by a couple of guests, and we're going to be talking today about navigating AI, which is a very relevant and hot topic, of course. Before we get into that, we'll do some introductions, and even before we get into that, I'd just like to remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe, like the video as well, and if you've got any ideas or suggestions or comments, I'd definitely be happy to hear them. Okay, but beyond that, let's dive into the introductions and the session itself. So I wonder, Daniel, can I start with you with the introduction, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So I'm Daniel Ziekenoppasser-Powell. I'm a senior consultant at PA Consulting with some 8+ years of experience in delivering business analysis and leading business analysis jobs. I am at the heart of PA's adoption of AI, and since pivoting and focusing my efforts on the business application of AI, very much my focus space, I worked with clients to both start their implementation journeys and move along them, including with PA itself, a consultancy of some 4,000 consultants. In terms of my background, I have focused previously on end-to-end business transformation, but the early part of last year I had something of an existential crisis. I had my first play with ChatGPT and it blew me away. But the one thing that really stuck with me, while what it produced wasn't incredibly stellar in terms of quality, was that this was a very early maturity product. There was a lot more to come. There was a lot more development to go. And the fact is, I didn't see my job existing as I was delivering it then in 5 years' time. It felt like a rug had been pulled out underneath my feet. So very excitedly pivoted with something of an urgency into focusing on AI and into focusing on how it impacts businesses, which led me to a couple of months ago presenting at the Business Analysts 2024 Conference Europe in London and delivering a presentation there on how AI impacts business analysis, what the future looks like. And I'm excited to be able to share some of those insights here today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Daniel. Yeah, perfect guest to get us started on this topic. Asif, over to you, please, for your introduction.
Sure. Hey, guys. I'm Asif Sharif. I'm the CEO and founder of Modern Requirements, Copilot for DevOps, and Codeless One. So these are all tools around requirements engineering. And in a couple of years ago, Microsoft and my company started to work on Copilot for DevOps. So Microsoft was doing the Copilot 365. We were doing with them Copilot for DevOps. So that was our first take at AI within our solutions. And of course, since then, we have come a long way. And I'm sure we get to talk a lot more about it. Obviously, AI is the big revolutionary thing today and is about to, if hasn't already changed everything, but it's going to be so much more in months and years to come.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Asif. So really good to hear your opinions throughout the session. And I know from your introductions and from hearing about you previously, definitely really good people to be talking with us on this topic today. So thanks again. So maybe let's start with the first question. Daniel, I'll put this one to you, if I may, in terms of, how do you see AI transforming the role of the business analyst in the next few years?
So I think it's already started to, and I have a kind of three-phase concept as to how it changes how business analysis is delivered. So I think what we're looking at now, what we're seeing now is acceleration of particular activities, making use of the tools that are out there. Obviously, there's a very long list of different tools, different platforms. The one that most people will know is, of course, ChatGPT, or perhaps some of its close competitors, Claude. And those are being used to accelerate specific activities, usually in isolation, usually using some kind of prompt engineering to get the best out of it and to move things along a bit more quickly. So I see that developing further. I see that becoming, so prompt engineering specifically is quite complicated. It's both something that's quite an art and a science at the same time. There's certain things to try, but to be really good at it, you need a good intuition of how it works. And when we're looking at adoption of new ways of working in any business, the key is that you make it as simple as possible. If there's any kind of complexity layered into it, it's not going to be something that en masse people adopt. And there's a lot of competitive drivers to ensure that people adopt these technologies. The speed at which people are able to deliver the same amount of work, or perhaps even more work and more higher quality work, is massively reduced. I like to think of it as something of a force multiplier. You are reducing the time frame to deliver your work, you're reducing the cost envelope, therefore, to deliver that piece. And as a result, you become more competitive in the market. So I think there's very significant industry-wide pressures to augment and adopt this AI, well, large language models specifically as a form of AI technology. So I see that compounding how people use AI tools now, and I see it becoming something that's more platform driven in the future, in a phase I like to call augmentation, which I think really embeds as a typical way of working within the next couple of years. And in that situation, I see us moving more towards standardized tool sets, which are going to become more commonplace. There can be platforms where the end-to-end process of delivery is captured. It's coordinated and facilitated by AI. It's integrated into the value chain because it becomes the value chain. You have the inputs that you need for a specific activity flowing into you. You have recommendations from an AI as to what you might want to do, what you might want to execute, flowing into what it is that you're doing. You do what you need to do, and that flows out to where it needs to go next, whether that's into a PowerPoint slide pack or whether it's into a further piece of analysis. It's an open question. But the key is that we're looking at that kind of augmentation platform as the future as to how work is delivered. I think there's a slightly more contentious future beyond that, where things become more AI-led. As I said before, this technology is at a really early level of maturity. Things are going to advance, and the capabilities that it fields will significantly gear up. We, of course, have various limitations with large language models now. Limitations around hallucinations, limitations around bias, potentially. A lot is trained out, but there's still concerns remaining around it. But as the technology matures and as organizations focus and spend a lot of money on developing these capabilities out further, those will reduce in the impact that they have. So we come to trust the output of AI more, where it becomes more reliable, higher quality, without needing intervention. And so where in the next couple of years, you ideally wouldn't see AI making decisions, though you may see it in some instances, further into the future, it's going to be an engine which does make decisions. And our role as human BAs becomes one that is more on the edge. So things become more AI-led. The AI knows where it's not quite as effective, where it's not quite as capable. And that's where we as individuals play our part in delivery of that new way of delivering projects, that way of delivering business analysis.
Thank you, Daniel. Very good start there, and a very interesting start as well, I might say. Asif, what would be your opinion on that same question?
Yeah, you know what I'll do is I'll show you something and sort of build on what Daniel said. So let me share my screen. Okay, so what we are going to do is, of course, the idea of AI is it can facilitate what you do, improve the quality of work you're producing, the speed at which you're doing, hopefully make you happier in the process. So let's take an example. I've got an epic here, yeah, and I'm going to call Copilot for DevOps. And you'll see that I'm going to start by using elicitation. And what I'm going to say is, given this epic, I want you to create features for me, or certainly recommend features for me. I'll go and come up with a series of recommendations of what might be needed. You can give it specific instructions if you like. Or you can just sort of, without instructions, just tell it to come up with stuff on its own, and it'll come up with on its own. So it's come up with some recommendations. Now I can come up with more recommendations. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and tell these items that get the description for it. Okay? So it'll now go get the description. You see, the change now happens. Instead of you doing a chat session, doing a lot of work, to do the initial brainstorming, this is coming up with recommendations. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and publish these as work items. And your starting point is done. Now, imagine I actually want only features. I say, give me features with AI. Okay. So I'm just going to tell him, give me features with AI in it. So it's going to look for, in the consulting management system, what features might you need for AI? And it's going to come up with a series of things, of AI tracking with time tracking with AI, and so on and so forth. So what you can do now is you can have the AI system look the way you want it to look. So just looking at this type of functionality, what is the impact of being able to come up with these features? And once you have the features, you can then go define its user stories. And once you have the user stories, you can define its test cases at lightning speed. But the important part is you do need to review this and then decide which one of these you want and which ones you don't want. So the difference becomes, instead of you spending the next month trying to figure out what the system should do, you give it the right context, it comes up with information that you can realize quickly. So your job now becomes that of a curator, as a collaborator between the AI system and your business. That's the change in paradigm. You see, when I was young and smart, I used to be a developer. And I know from those days that getting the requirements right was extremely important. And it was a very time-consuming process. And by the time you get to understand what the requirement is, and then you start to curate it, it just takes a lot of time. Now all of that time can be collapsed into 1/10 of it, maybe 1/20th of it. What does that mean for your job, right? How do you work intelligently when you have this sort of intelligence available to you at your fingertips? And I think that's a very exciting future for business analysis, for product owners and requirements engineers, because we now have access to great power. In fact, I tell my team that this is the Iron Man suit you have. And now that you have this superpower, what are you going to do with it? And there are amazing things. We continue to see what people do. So I think I'll leave it with that, with an example to suggest what future, or certainly this is the present, future will be even more exciting.
Okay, and I wonder, as if you take that back off screen, if you wouldn't mind, please. But very, very interesting though, and it's I mean, it's just one example there of really, the power of AI in this case, to be able to do some of the early work for us, to be able to create some conceptual stories or features, or perhaps actually built off the stories and features that we've got, to be able to then to turn them into something appropriate, really, to hand over to the design team and the implementation team. I'm just going to stop your sharing so I can see you both. There we go. It's better. No, an interesting example. Thanks for the demonstration, Asif. And I guess there's sort of seen different examples of what you've just displayed there in many forms, different locations. I know at Capco, for example, we've got a tool fairly similar called BA Genie that does fairly similar work by the looks of it, of what you've displayed there. But I guess going back to the point maybe that Daniel made earlier, is that at the moment we've probably got a number of disparate AI tools that do a small part of the step, but actually in the longer term, perhaps bringing those together into something more cohesive and actually joining them up could be a future where BAs and change is operating in, shall we say. I wonder, with that, building on that, I mean, how do you identify? We'll start with you, Asif, first on this one. In terms of, how would you identify business problems or situations that might be best suited for AI solutions?
Nearly everything is, in nearly all situations, you'll find AI can be helpful. The question is how much.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I've learned is when I talk about AI in abstract terms, people tend to get lost. And so what I like to go do is come back to an example of a model. So for example, if I have written a requirement and I need to see how well that requirement is written, I can actually call analyze, and it'll look at the requirement and tell me how well it is written. And it'll tell me how I can fix the issues in the requirements, and it'll score it for me. Okay. So depending on what you're trying to do, there's a variety of tools available. And in some ways, tools are fragmented, but in other ways, these tools are integrated together so you can navigate from one function point to the other without leaving, in this case, Copilot. You can do a lot of the things without actually leaving this space and do a variety of things that might be relevant. Okay. So in fact, one of the things you can do with this thing is I gave my team a mandate a year ago. So a year ago, I went to my team and said, I want every department in the company to 2x our productivity. 3 weeks ago, we had a year-end planning session, and we achieved 75% of that goal. So we went from 150% sharp to about 200 some odd percent. So 270 or something like that. Depending on the division, we saw a marked improvement in how we do requirements, how we do dev, how we do testing, in every aspect of our operation, from marketing to sales to everything. We have come to a point where if somebody says they don't use AI, whether through Copilot or Codeless One or ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot or whatever tools they use, if they say that they don't use Copilot, we actually stop and say, why not? Show us the reason why you had to do it manually, because they've taken 5 times longer to do it. And the quality is going to be compromised. So what we're trying to find is what is the best combination between human input and AI input, and what is the new way of working. And defining this new way of working is what we are obsessed with right now. And as far as I'm concerned, nearly 99% of the activities we do, AI has an important role to play in it.
Thank you, Asif. And so I guess then the priority becomes not necessarily the identification, but as you said, really the prioritization of the items that we focus on next. I wonder, Daniel, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that same point.
So I've done quite a bit of analysis around this, and in my conference presentation, I dived into quite a lot of depth, or not full depth. Where I look at business analysis tools, I tend to look across the whole life cycle, looking across discovery, design, implementation, and embedding. And of course, there's quite a long list of different tools, techniques, and activities that you employ across that, and quite a diverse range of those types of activities that you're performing. So what I previously did as part of an analysis leading a team within PA is a traffic light automatability rating against those working through a process, understanding how automatable do we think this is against this traffic light automatability rating, which went from kind of red, as in red alert, this is something that we're not going to be doing in the future. And there's a good few examples against that. Working down through different bands, through a kind of classification system I came up with. So fully automatable, excluding perhaps validation check, majority of content pre-generated, and just a little bit further extra work in terms of manual work. Then tier below that was best practices and first pass data. So it's a really solid starting point to be iterating from. Below that, just having some kind of best practice generated as a starting point. And below that, the tier of not automatable, but is perhaps benefited by brainstorming or some other kind of capabilities. You say as if nothing will truly be unautomated in our future state. Nothing will be without any kind of augmentation, but there is definitely prioritization across all of that. Broadly, a bit of a soundbite, I think highly structured processes are where the immediate high impact use cases lie. Anything that's rule-based tools, analyses, anything that's using best practices, and if anything's using publicly available information, that trifecta of characteristics is something that represents activities that are really ripe for automation, because large language models are brilliant at being able to tackle all three of those. If you've got the right structure in your processes, then you can build out AI applications which are stage gated in the right way to overcome its limitations, generating small bits of content at a time and then checking back, as Asif you showed there in your requirements tool. There's, as long as you can break it down to small segments and you verify and validate what's coming out of it, then you're able to effectively automate it with this kind of AI technology. And of course, business analysis has a huge range of tools and techniques which are very highly rule-based. There's certainly a lot of response-based activities where perhaps you've got what I call kind of infinite branching possibilities because you are responding based on what that person has told you and you're employing some very different action that's completely tailored. But generally what the BA profession strives for is rule-based structure where you can follow it through and work out what you should be doing each of those stages and build a big picture from it. And so I do think quite a lot of activity across business analysis is quite ripe for that kind of automation. And that is why I think it's quite an inevitable future that we do see platforms which are augmenting the whole end-to-end process, because it is something that can be quite effectively accelerated through those means.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's a variety of interesting points there, Daniel. And I think it just goes to show that maybe for people that are new to AI at the moment, maybe the areas or activities or tasks that they perform in a minute, the ones to focus on first, maybe are those, as you said, maybe they're more repeatable, those that are maybe more admin of a burden, more of an admin burden. Perhaps where the BA is not really adding the real value, maybe just maybe an unnecessary cog in the chain, as it were. And maybe there's also a benefit in trying to pick those tasks that the BAs are just not enjoying as well. I think there's probably a little bit of merit in that as well. But it seems like building on what Asif said, really everything theoretically can be in some way augmented and automated. It's just a question of what, and actually probably we should focus our efforts on augmenting and automating the most important processes to do so, rather than less easy ones, simple ones. I wonder. I mean, we've sort of talked a little bit about AI automation, how it's augmenting roles. I wonder, specific to process. I know you touched on this one a little while ago, Daniel. I guess to what extent, if you need to build on any more on what you said before, to what extent will we see, AI taking over many of the process-related activities that we currently perform as BAs?
I think it depends to a degree where you sit and what it is that you're delivering as a business analyst. It's, as you well know, a very broad profession, and you can be doing just a small segment of what is BCS's defined business analysis lifecycle, or you could be working across the whole of it, which is what I typically tend to do, driving forward transformation pieces. I think or I know from my analysis that there is a lot more automatability within a discovery phase. So looking at establishing the end state, understanding the requirements, a prime example of where a lot of efficiency can be got at, understanding the as-is picture as well. It's rare that an organization's current state is completely unique. If information isn't broadly available online already, then there's probably other organizations that are in a similar position. And with just a little bit of context, you can very much tailor a large language model to say, okay, this is the kind of situation we're facing in the first instance. And it's then able to pre-populate and generate a lot of that as is state. And the same goes for the to-be state that you're heading towards. Again, people are usually inspired by what other organizations around them are doing. And, competition analysis is absolutely something that can be performed and driven by AI. And when you define what it is that you want to head towards in terms of moving your organization in that direction or moving a product in that direction, a lot of that to-be state is something that could be generated with unique proposition built into it afterwards. So yeah, what came out of my analysis was about 62% automatability across the discovery phase. And while it's quite a broad array of diverse activities, that to me is one of the things that will see a lot of automation, especially since it's using usually the opening salvo for any kind of organization or any contractor that's doing BA to go into an organization and identify that to be, identify that as is, do a little bit of road mapping. That's usually your kind of opening piece of work. It's creating the further opportunity. It's setting a baseline for further work, further activity. So being able to do it faster, being able to do it cheaper is something that is, of course, going to be quite attractive to any organizations that are looking to do that sort of work.
Yeah, and actually some of the things you said there as well is quite easy to us to sort of see how our use of AI can evolve over time, because we think about part of what you said there around that current state analysis and trying to draw your conclusion on what the actual process is at the moment. Whilst we can enter some prompts to say, look, my focus is on reducing cost or improving customer experience or increasing speed of throughput, they can all be influencers to determine what the target state needs to look like. But also we can use AI to actually suggest some of those dimensions as well, to mean we don't have to rely on eliciting all of the right answers from our stakeholders. I still think we need to go and take those drivers that we've generated to our stakeholders to make sure they have a say in the process and change isn't being done to them without the right reason. But it feels like at least there's that building blocks to start taking that current state through to the target state, as you mentioned.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it'd be interesting as well to get your view on that same point around AI and process.
Yeah. So I think inevitably AI will do more and more of what we do today. And if you look at the rate of advancement over the last 2 years, it's been just stunning. And it will continue to happen. Okay. And sort of AI agents are coming and more bigger context memory is coming, and all of that's going to give us a lot of power. In fact, with O1 models now, there's reasoning inbuilt into it. And so the systems are getting smarter, and the systems will do more. I think the question becomes, I think it's hard to tell where will it stop. What I am convinced of is what we need to do as practitioners, as business analysts. We need to look at how is my job changing, and how do I stay relevant and add value to the process. I think that's the real difficult question we need to encounter and answer. I'll give you an example. Take a look at this. I'm going to show you how far an app can go. Okay, so this is an AI tool with automation built into it. It's called Codeless One, and what I'm going to tell it is I want an asset management system for a SaaS firm. Okay? I won't give it a description. I'll go next. It'll come up with some recommendations for me of what you might want to have in a asset management system. And then you can add, it's defining an object model for you, and it'll come up with recommendations for your relationships. And then you can tweak this. And then you're done. It'll go off, figure out what that application should do, what the UI should be, and I'll just accept these by default. It'll figure out what front end should look like, how to make a beautiful, professional looking front end, create a database for you, glue everything together, add security, add dashboarding, add reporting, add a bunch of additional functionality. And when it's done with all of it, it'll publish it on a site and make it available to you. Okay? And all of that will happen within 2 minutes. So one example of this is really, if you are a business analyst who's trying to do requirements validation, you can take a concept, present it to people, and then fine tune it. And in the end, you can decide whether you want to use the app or you want to build it, but you have a validated concept that has been put together. Okay. So while I was talking, the app actually got created for you. And this is the app. Now, I have another app here with data in it, same exact app. And now what you can do is you can be using this application to do the event management activities. This app was created literally in 2 minutes. Okay. Now we can go change it. So if you look at it, if you look at the traditional prototyping approach we have taken, or how you might have used in the past, to create an app, forget with the real database and security and everything in it, if you just drew it, right? If you to just create this, it would have taken weeks to draw it, link everything, and so on. Now we have this instantaneously. You see, this is an example of how things are changing, how powerful AI systems can become, where you now have the ability to nearly wish it into existence. Okay. Now, is this the exact thing your business needs, your stakeholders need? Maybe not. But this would be a great way to get people to think through what they want and define your requirements so that you hit the nail on the head, as opposed to exploring in sort of a classic agile way. You build something, you change it, you constantly evolve through that. Yeah. Now you can have the right solution, and then you sprint through it to build it out in a much more streamlined way. So the question then becomes that if the technology, which of course this is there already, if this is the type of technology you're going to be having with AI and automation, what does that really mean for you, right? And it really goes back to, how do you define what you do and how do you evolve with AI? That's going to be the critical part. Will it hit a ceiling? I can guarantee you no time soon, not in the next 5 years. And even beyond that, I would think it would not. So exciting times, but sometimes fearful for people. But I would say, take the challenge of working with AI and don't be fearful of it, because it's a hell of a ride. You'll have a lot of fun doing it in reinventing how you do your things.
Yeah. Oh, excellent advice. And actually, what by presenting that as well, I mean, it helps me. It makes me think about the humble wireframe, that we used to create. We still do create, in fairness. It's never really the perfect solution. It's a first step on the road to that. And actually, as you said, something this quick has all of the benefits and none of the pain, I guess, that a wireframe has. And of course, this we can rip it apart as well in the same way we could have with a wireframe, and decide really what the future UI, a screen, or whatever it is we're designing, what it could look like.
Yep.
So thank you for that. I wonder as well, when building on that, I mean, we typically think about BAs as sort of like enabling decision makers, providing the data and the content that allows, the business or technology, whoever it might be, to actually decide on the way forward. Be interesting to get your view, Asif. I'll start with you first, actually, in terms of, how can AI improve or complement or even maybe take over, if that's even appropriate, some of the decision making that BAs are involved in or work with?
I suppose before O1 model came out, a lot of the reasoning capabilities were very limited. With O1, the reasoning capability has become much, much stronger. In fact, it's become so strong that in math competitions and studies with PhD in physics, biology, chemistry, the O1 preview model from OpenAI are doing better than most PhD graduates. That's the level of its sophistication today, right? So the reasoning capability is critical. Of course, context is important on however you're doing things. So if we give it the right context, we have the right reasoning model. For example, in Copilot for DevOps, we just introduced O1 preview. Actually, O1 mini we have added by default now. So people who are looking at complicated logic calculation, now they can use these models to actually make decisions, right? Or if you're creating code or test scripts for that matter, right? Yeah. That's going to be a big part of how you end up reasoning. So certainly, I think that there is a trajectory of how things are changing in terms of decision making. Certainly with the agent workflow. So we are building out an agent framework where the BA can collaborate with not a instant activity of what I've shown you so far, but actually the agent and the BA can collaborate to stitch the whole solution together, right? And that requires a lot of decision making in the process. So we have certainly come from some exciting stuff to some amazing stuff with reasoning models, and the future is going to be even more. Again, it'll come down to how do we partner with AI? So either you partner with it or you fight it. I suggest we partner with it.
Yeah, good advice. That Daniel, what will be your perspective on that same question?
There's a lot of aspects to it. I think improvement and building what you're just showing, I think there's a few tools out there which can really help you make decisions faster, not necessarily make the decisions, and that's one of the benefits that's out there now. I worked with a client in the consumer manufacturing industry and innovation team, and one of their challenges was that they weren't able to bring ideas to life for their seniors to take forward and to make decisions against. They're generating digital concepts. It's somewhat quite abstract and quite hard to imagine what that might look like and really be able to sell it. So one of the tools that we down selected and made use of in that new process was one called UiZard, which I'm not going to show a demonstrator of here and now, but it generates those wireframes. It's not just a wireframe though, they generate a whole web interface and it's a working prototype. And you can grab the code in React, I think JavaScript, and pull that onto a web server and deploy it. It's not connected into all the backend systems, but as far as a capability to rapidly prototype and just like that be able to make kind of more informed decisions better and faster, it's a huge jump forwards. I think broadly, is AI making decisions now? No, I think coordination and facilitation is where it's at for now. I don't think it's quite there yet in terms of taking over. O1, of course, does increase the reasoning abilities, although there are some research studies showing that the longer that it thinks, the more it's likely to lead itself to wrong places, and there's probably a kind of sweet point. We haven't, of course, seen the full capabilities of the full O1 Strawberry model yet because it's not publicly released. Might be something significantly more impressive than O1 Preview, but in summary, I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're very much on a trajectory for it though, and I don't think it'll be a very long way away. This. Yeah. Maybe a year, maybe two, before you're getting to AI having the capability to make decisions intelligently on our behalf, and it will correlate that it's making as good decisions as what we would otherwise do. Now, more short term and perhaps more pragmatic in terms of what the audience of this podcast might be interested in. I think one of the potential complications to watch now is that if you have capabilities that you can't trust, you're going to be adding a layer of validation and uncertainty on what you do. I think the key for any individual right now is understand the tools that you're using and their limitations, and how the product that you're using attempts to overcome those limitations. You want to validate with it, you want to build trust, but you also want to be prepared and challenge and be proactive in what you need, that other options might come up that are better for you, or that the product you're using may make a different design decision which doesn't necessarily match up with your use case anymore. So there's a need to be agile as well. And while it will accelerate how quickly you can make a decision, there is that risk, that complication that you might need to spend more brain power looking at what's been produced. Overall, you'll take less time, but it may feel like a lot of work, and it's part of the struggle of any kind of adoption, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Now there's that balance, really, isn't it? Determining, what is your trust in the process to come up with an automated decision. What is the criteria it's applying and the rules it's applying, and ultimately what's the data that it's leveraging to actually apply those rules to. And I guess whilst maybe the technology to make the decisions is probably there, the criteria and the rules behind what decisions should be made at all times, that probably isn't yet, or at least there's not that consistency within organisations to be able to say 100% we always go left versus right. And then there's the data, of course, to be able to let AI decide on our behalf. And most of there's a lot of occasions where the data we make in general business and the decisions we make, that's made off of data that's not captured digitally at the moment. So that's I guess another challenge that will be resolved, I'm sure, in very, very near term to come together as one solution. I guess the probably the final question almost from me, I think, in this one then is we've obviously talked about business analysis, how it might evolve, how some of the activities that we've done will be done in quite a radically different way. Some of them might not be done at all. And maybe actually definitely there's going to be a shift in the way that we work as BAs. So I wonder, Daniel, really, what would be your view on some of the skills or areas of knowledge or expertise that BAs would do well to perhaps invest in going forward, so that they're best equipped really for a more AI world in the future?
I think prompt engineering is the big one right now, but perhaps not for the reason that everyone might assume. I don't think everyone needs to be able to build out their own workflows using prompting. I don't think that's the future that we're headed towards either. This kind of prompt engineering is going to move into the background, and increasingly so individuals will be using click and point applications. It's a complicated act, as I said before. It's an art and a science. Not everyone is going to be able to master it, and the key is that people can use it as effectively as possible. But understanding prompt engineering now, you'll get an understanding of the limitations of large language models. You'll get an understanding of the nuance that it takes in order to be able to get to the answer that you need in a consistent and reliable way, that you're getting the quality and the completeness out of that response that you want to see. Without that kind of understanding, without the understanding of the limitations of the tools, you potentially either sit in a camp of fear of these tools that, what will they do? I can't really trust their output. Or you perhaps sit in the other camp where you're blindly trusting them and you're putting mistakes essentially into your work and putting your reputation at risk, putting your deliveries at risk because you are blindly making use of these outputs from large language models. So I think the key is putting yourself in the mid ground, understanding the limitations, understanding the capabilities, in particular, keeping an eye on the frontier models. So, of course, we talked about one model there from OpenAI, Strawberry, as it's been called as well by OpenAI. I work with quite a large number of consultants who still haven't made effective use of that tool. And it is something that is an effective game changer in the quality of response that you're getting out from a large language model. It's not something that's otherwise captured into other tools as yet. So yeah, broadly, I think there's a good bit of advice there. Just stay aware of what these frontier models are doing, have a play with their capabilities, get to grips with it. You may use it in your work, you may not, but having an understanding of the trajectory and the current capabilities that these solutions out there have, and you're setting yourself for success in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. Asif, what will be your point on that?
Yeah, I would actually like to make a point on the previous thing. I wanted to give an example, the best example I know of decision making by AI. And so if you've ever driven Tesla's FSD, that is the perfect example, as far as I can tell, about AI decision making. When I drive from here to Montreal, so where I live, it takes me 3 hours to drive to Montreal. I will barely, once, maybe twice, touch my steering wheel. Every turn, every intersection, every minute detail, it'll take care of and make decisions to just an amazing level, right? AIs are making decisions. It's just a question of, do you have the right tools for it to make the right decisions? Okay. And of course, that's just the starting of the thing, right? I mean, once we get FSD unsupervised, it'll be to the next level hopefully in a year or two. But there are other examples of that as well. So what was the question, John?
So the question was around the skills, knowledge, areas of expertise that BAs should develop to take the best of the new environment, really.
Right. So here's what I would tell you. The skills, a good BA is a good communicator, right? Is a good facilitator between different stakeholders, and that ability to communicate, I think, remains paramount. Now you have a new stakeholder. You have the AI system or systems that you're communicating with, right? Prompt engineering, whatever you want to call it, will remain essential. You've got to be able to ask for the right things. If you can't ask for the right things, you cannot be given the right things, right? Like I have often heard people say that asking the right question is half the solution. I think that stays true. In fact, even more true with AI, right?
Yeah.
So can we communicate effectively? Again, you can call it prompt engineering or whatever means you might have for communication, but communication is going to remain your paramount skill. But now you have to be more mindful of how to communicate with AI, as I'm sure you're mindful of how to talk to technical people versus business people. Now you have an AI system you have to talk to. That's the skill that's going to be extremely important. I think the other thing that's going to be extremely important for business analysts is the ability to evolve. Okay. Fear is our biggest enemy. And so what I say is try fast, fail fast, learn fast, right? Try out things, maybe in small bites, quickly figure out, does it work? Pivot, repeat, and keep doing that. Because you can hear all kinds of experts talk about all of these things, and that's good for getting some sort of a thought on how things might come together, but the only proven way of solving this problem is for you to try it and keep trying it till you figure out how you can become the master of the AI system. Because ultimately, you need to be that. And your ability to think out of the box, be courageous, and communicate effectively with all stakeholders, including AI system, is going to be your key to future success as a BA.
I would agree. Yeah, and actually, just building on the point you've both made. I mean, I think the BAs actually feel like they're in the perfect place actually from a skills and mindset perspective to adapt. As long as we keep hold of our curious mindset that we should all have, that's going to help. We all are always. I hope we're always keen to learn and develop and explore new techniques. I mean, the evidence is in the BA textbooks themselves. I mean, the number of techniques grows year on year, week on week, probably. So that's evidence alone. I think as well. I think to reassure BAs, when they think about things like prompt engineering or whatever's going to exist beyond that, we've all, when we started, we all learned how to engage with stakeholders, how to ask the right questions to get the information from them, how to maybe consider perhaps what one stakeholder tells us can't be relied on 100%. So therefore, how do we validate that from maybe speaking to others, reaching other sources or looking at the data? And I think we can all apply that same mentality and that same approach to a brand new stakeholder, I think as you put it, as if, and apply that to AI, and make sure we ask it the right questions. And if we're not sure if we've asked it the right questions and it's given us the right answer, keep asking. Ask it why. Ask it where the information come from, to explore the answer a bit further. And don't just rely on it. Speak to stakeholders as well, whether that's to review what you produced or as an input into what you're about to produce. But I feel like on that point, we've sort of got to a natural point of interest where we can take a pause. I feel like this topic, we could probably be talking about it for a long while. I'll spare you both sticking around for another couple of hours to do so. But what I will do is just thank you both. Thank you, Daniel and Asif, for joining us, sharing us with your insight. Loads of interesting food for thought as well. I know this is not going to be the end of thought on this topic. So I'll look forward to hearing from you both in the future in the BA capability or community, rather. And thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.